Hello, everybody. I'm Tim from Las Vegas.
I'm Sam from the Pacific Northwest. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of still entitled The Western Contingent. Because
Hey, man, it's sticking right now, brother. It's like nobody's saying anything that I
yeah,
can tell. And so people are happy with that. I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool.
uh,
But so
that's
I
cool.
think it's going to stick like glue, bro.
All right, we are the Western arm of the Dice Tower.
Right.
Two contributors from the Dice Tower out here, out west. So,
Mhm.
how was your week, Sam? I know we were talking a little bit earlier, and I think we both watched the game on Sunday.
We did. I, for one, was very pleased with the outcome. I have a couple of. I'm a Alabama Crimson Tide fan. That's the college team that I follow and that I have kind of sidled up against. I'm not. I wouldn't really consider myself a fan, but I do see other people with Crimson Tide hats on, and I walk by and I say "Roll Tide," and they say "Roll Tide" back.
Uh,
So I'm that kind of person, and so Jalen Hurts and oh goodness, I want to say Devonte Adams. They were both Roll Tide, Crimson Tide players, and so I watched them growing up, and so I
yeah,
wanted to see them succeed.
but hold on a
Um,
second. Hold on a second. I don't know if Jalen Hurts, the way he was treated, would consider himself, even though he did win a national title, right? Would consider himself
he did well.
uh,
He
a,
he kind
a
of he kind of tag teamed. That was the year that they won. That he was there. He kind of tag teamed with uh
Tua, right?
Tua Tagovailoa,
Yeah,
and so yeah, I get it. He moved on to Oklahoma, I think.
correct. He actually
Yeah,
started that. He started the national championship game they won because by winning this past Super Bowl, one of the facts they put up was he was the first player, which is quite surprising. I was
really.
to hear that statistic, the first player to start and win both a national championship and a Super Bowl.
I didn't realize that.
I
That's
know that
cool.
that is cool.
Hey
That
man,
seems kind of unusual.
kudos to him. My whole thing is that I'm very much a proponent of I'm a Bears fan. If my Bears aren't in the picture anymore, then I am a Bears conference fan. Even if that means rooting for the Packers, I don't know. Rooting for the Packers is really hard for me. Really, really hard. But if our division isn't in it, then I'm a conference. I root for the conference, so I'm very much an NFC person. I want the NFC to win, that kind of thing. So that's why I was rooting for the Eagles. I really don't have any other skin in it other than that. I mean, actually, I before I was a Bears fan when I was a little kid, my mom always decked me out in Cowboys stuff, and the Cowboys are the arch nemesis of the Eagles, and so. Um, but really, the fact that they are NFC, they were the NFC team, and that there were a couple of old Alabama players on there that I wanted to see succeed. Beyond that, I also think I liked the team dynamic of the Eagles a little bit better than I did the Chiefs. Just to see how Hurts um, leads his line because I was a linebacker. I was a linebacker, defensive line, and offensive line in high school, and I liked how the lines on both sides actually were kind of highlighted. They
Mhm.
were talking about how well the Chiefs' defensive line was stopping Barkley on the run, and um, it was fun to see. That first turnover when Jalen Hurts threw that one interception, and Jurgen let that Chiefs defender basically untouched. The cameras cut back to them after that, and it was Jalen Hurts with an iPad with his line around him, and they were talking about things. And I like that dynamic where they didn't start just yapping at each other. They didn't start barking at each other. So come on, man. No, he was there talking about assignments, talking about this, talking about that. You could just tell that there was a really neat spirit about that, and I liked to see Jalen. leading his linemen instead of berating them when they let somebody through. And that's just something you don't really see in professional sports, unfortunately. Well, I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying that the TV stations usually don't cover it. You know, they want you to see all of the emotion and the being at each other's throats and wanting each other to be competitive and all that kind of stuff. They want you to see that, but they don't want you to see those peaceful moments where which is what it should be like, you know what I mean, as professionals. But anyway, I really enjoyed the game. Yes, it was very much a
Well,
a
I can
blowout
say, yeah, I can say I didn't enjoy the game. It was
because it was a blowout.
not. It was just not a good football game. You know,
Really?
no, not at all. I mean, come on, that was just not a good football game at all. I mean, the Chiefs, even though they lost by what, 20 points or something, it wasn't even that close. They got annihilated. It was
Yeah,
just,
they
it was
didn't.
not a good game.
I get you. I guess it it was a good game to me. I get your perspective. Absolutely get. You want to see, and especially in the Super Bowl, you want to see the two Titans going after each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. I just think that I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but I think it just highlighted, and not that I don't think that the Chiefs don't have a good team synergy, but I think it just highlighted because the Eagles and Hurts have been just like kind of bashed all year long about how Jalen Hurts isn't a top 10 quarterback, he doesn't even belong, whatever. And so hearing that rhetoric and hearing that narrative all year and then have him win the Super Bowl, I thought it was poetic, especially in such a commanding fashion.
Yeah. I was just a little bit disappointed, just for the fact, because in America, I mean, it's one of the most viewed events around the
Yep.
world, right? As far as a specific television show or specific event. And it would just be, to me, it would be just be so much better to have one of our sort of biggest products, right? American products that the rest of the world gets to see,
Sure.
as far as like a television show, the football game. It would be, to me, I would have liked to see just a better game, because even if you look at, like, say, soccer, right, the world's most popular sport, in a big match, even if it's 0-0 or 0-1, there's kind of like tension through the whole
Yeah,
90 minutes plus overtime.
absolutely.
So you're engaged, and like, even a 1-0 game you can kind of consider exciting, or 0-0.
Yes,
Americans
absolutely.
might think it's boring, right? Because we need scoring, right? We're,
Well,
we're we don't
yeah,
we don't like
that's true. That's an
yeah,
American. But one of the things that I hated about the NHL is that they changed the size of the crease in the goalie. The goalie's crease, that little
right,
what
right,
used to
right.
be a blue half circle in front of the goal. They changed the size of that so that players could get closer to the goal, which would make it harder for the goalies to stop the pucks. And that was one of the things that I just really disliked. And it was all driven by people are saying that we don't score enough goals. So
Oh
let's
yeah.
make it to where they score more goals. And I'm like, no,
Yes. Look at
that's
the
part of the tension.
Yeah, look at the NBA with the 3-point line. I don't like that either. I mean, that's all, not all, I'm just using, being a little bit hyperbolic, but that's all
Right.
players do is shoot threes, because it has come, with the old, was it Billy Bean, right? The old statistic thing, like in baseball and stuff. A
Yeah.
2-point shot is a bad shot in basketball. Like,
Yeah.
there's, why take a 2-point shot when you can take a 3-point shot? It just doesn't make sense, and I hate how the game is transformed into that. But yeah, but going back to the Super Bowl, it was a great party, a great day. I'm sure a lot of people did what I did. It's an unofficial national holiday here in America, right? It's a day when people get together, have parties, and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I
Yep.
had a great time, great food, a great event my friend has every year. But I wish it could have been just a better game.
I get
But
you. I mean, part of me wants to say, and I'll just go ahead and say it because people will disagree with me, I guess. But part of me just wants to say that it kind of almost proves that the Chiefs really shouldn't have been there. I think they got an easy route, and they just weren't as good of a team as everybody thought they were.
I don't, but again, I mean, I know we're talking a lot about sports. I don't necessarily think a lot of people thought they were a great team. I mean, they went, I don't know what it
Really?
was, 12 or 15 games in a row with a single point win. So I
True.
don't hear any pundits or anybody saying they had a great season or they were a great team. Sure, they
Yeah.
squeaked by a lot and they got in there, but they still got there. You know what I mean? Like they say,
Sure.
professional sports is like a game of inches, whether it's hockey, basketball, baseball, whatever. It's just
Right.
small little mistakes, small little margins, things like that. So
Yeah.
they deserved to be there. And I don't remember anybody saying they had a great season or they were like a great team. But if you get to the Super Bowl, you deserve to be there. You've gotten there.
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
everybody else had the opportunities to stop you or beat you, and they didn't. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think the refs had more than a significant impact on the Chiefs' journey to the Super Bowl.
yeah, but Sam,
Um,
that goes both ways, right? Every team
yeah,
gets breaks.
maybe.
You can't just say that because that happens to everybody. I mean, so
I
right.
just said it though because it's like it's pretty well documented in games with the Chiefs where the Mahomes would really lean into all of those soft calls, and the refs would give it to him, but they wouldn't give it to the other team.
Yeah,
So much
all those
so that he started flopping. So much so that he started flopping
yeah, absolutely.
on the sidelines.
But here's my point. Again, the wins they got were by one score. If the other team can't do a better job in beating them, then that's on the other team's fault too. So sure, I mean, players
Maybe.
flop, players fake fouls. I mean, you see holding. There is literally holding every single play in football, but it's whether or not
Yeah,
the refs see it. So
that's true.
when
That's true.
when you say things like that, it's just a matter of part of the game. And if the other 12 teams, whatever they were, when they won by 1 point scores, didn't do the job to beat them by more than 1 point, then a lot of the onus goes on the other team as well. So you know what I mean? So you can't just give
Sure.
all the sort of blame and all on Kansas
No,
City.
not all the blame. Not all the blame, but you can't say that there aren't crucial calls that, if made, that's an automatic first down, and it either stops the drive or it allows the drive to continue.
No,
There
absolutely.
are definite
But then,
lynch points there, right?
correct. But there are definite lynch points on the other side, is what I'm saying. You can't say in a lot of
Sure.
those games there weren't players who dropped the ball, who fumbled the ball.
I didn't watch
who
all the
made a
games either.
critical-
I watch highlights a lot, so I don't watch all the games. So
Right. Yeah, and of course
they're
not showing those other things that are game deciders too, mistakes that the
Yeah.
other team makes. So
Yes.
it just
Yeah.
all equals out in the end, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
again,
I just think to get beat that bad, it leans towards maybe you shouldn't have been there to get beat that bad. Would they have beat the Bills that bad? Or any of the other teams that you know what I'm saying? I don't know. That's my thing. Part of me wants to say that if you get beat that bad in a championship game, you're the best team that the AFC could put up there, and you get whooped like that. I don't know about that. You know what I'm saying? On the professional level.
yeah, but again, it's and that's another that's a whole other discussion. But it comes down to like people's jobs, right? Most people have a 40-hour-a-week job. 48 weeks a year, whatever, they take vacations off.
Yeah.
So if you have a bad hour out of your entire work year, then it's just one little thing. But professional sports, like having that one bad game, like people want, like you're saying, you want to put the whole season on because you just had an off day. I mean, it's very hard to be a professional athlete and be at the top.
No, you're right.
Every single second. So just because
Totally
they have
agree with you.
one bad day, I think that's a little reckless to say they didn't deserve to be there, because unfortunately they just had a bad moment, right? They
Call
just had
me
a
Mr. Reckless.
Yes, you are being reckless.
I am. I just don't want to. My thing is that we started off saying that I was saying it was a great game. You were saying it wasn't a great game. I don't want to overshadow how great the Eagles played. I think the Eagles did an amazing job.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
Jalen Hurts silenced all of his pundits. One of the coolest things that I saw was that somebody posted a picture of Hurts walking by a TV screen, and on the TV screen it was the pregame show where everybody's picking who they think is going to win the game, and everybody on that panel had picked the Chiefs. And it showed him looking at the screen, and then there was another screenshot of him just going, all right,
Yeah.
then. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, go get him, brother. So it
Yeah.
was just, I don't know. I definitely enjoyed watching Cooper, the rookie, on his birthday, getting a pick six.
Oh,
That
good
was
pick
a
six,
really
yeah.
cool thing. I thought it was a good game. But I get what you're saying as well. Usually you want the two, behemoths going at each other. But that just didn't happen. I think that day, I saw somebody else showing it was a tweet. It was a conversation, a text conversation, and somebody was asking the other person, "Okay, are you going to be there?" And the other person just sent a picture of the Chiefs team in a huddle, and the other person went, "What? What are you talking about?" And the other person said, "Yep, don't think I'm going to show up."
Yeah, it was just not a good day for the Chiefs all the way around, from the players on the
Yeah,
field, to the coaching staff, to everything. It just was not
yes.
a good day for them.
It was a perfect storm situation for both sides in opposite directions. And I don't
Yes.
mean, please don't get me wrong. I don't mean to um like glory in somebody else's failure. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I was very happy to see how well the Eagles were doing. And
Yeah.
it was just a poetic situation. And I normally when I root for teams, they lose. So much so that I'm like, you don't want me to root for your team. I'm telling you, you don't. And so it was fun to watch a game and see the side that I wanted to win. It was fun. Anyway,
Oh, good,
that's
good.
that.
All right. I got to play a new game this week. That's been, I don't want to say getting a lot of buzz. That's been in the news recently. I guess it's, a sort of a fairly recent release, and that is the game Altay, Altay, by
Hmm.
not by Ares, Ares, Ares company, and
Oh,
it's not, yeah, and it's not a game that is typically in the sort of Ares line, or sort of what they're known for, because I would arguably say their sort of biggest hit is War of the Ring, right? And they all have like
sure.
Sales of
Yeah.
Glory, and they got things like that. Um, but it's a deck builder area control game where there is conflict involved, and it's very light. It's on the light end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was quick. It was enjoyable. Um, Again, it's a little bit. I don't want to sound like a snob when I say this, but a little bit like sort of too light for me. Like it's not a, you know what I mean? I'm not like like whatever, but it's just not a game I would kind of go to regularly. But it was enjoyable to play.
You
And
need
another thing,
you need like a cup of tea in your
yeah, there you go.
pinky.
With
I
my
would
pick,
say
yes.
that it's
Um,
a bit too light for me, actually.
yeah. And I'm not a sort of a big fan of deck building games, and the reason I'm not a big fan of them is because I'm not good at it at all. I'm not a
Fair.
card player. I mean, I did Magic, way, way, way back in the day.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but I'm not a card player, so I'm not good at figuring out the combinations, what I
Yeah.
should buy to enhance my deck. I mean, that's the biggest thing about a deck builder, right? Is knowing how to sort of constantly build your puzzle or your deck. And I'm just not good at that, at sort of forecasting. Oh, I need to get that card. Hopefully, we'll come out with this card to do that, and blah blah blah. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very bad at deck builders. And it had area control in it, but I just thought it was very clean. It would definitely be a game that I would teach to people, to get people up and playing right away, because I think it's relatively very, very easy to get started, get to the table, and get playing, and easy to
Yeah.
understand. So for
Cool.
all of those reasons, I would definitely recommend the game. I think it's a very good game, a very
Hmm.
enjoyable game. The only problem, which I know it's a problem to a lot of people, not me, is the conflict where you have the war aspect where you can fight people
Hmm.
and you take their pieces off the board and you get points for the pieces you take off the board of theirs. So that to some people would be a turnoff, right?
Sure.
Um, and yeah, so but other than that, I enjoy it. I think it's a great part of the game, so I highly recommend Alte to at least give it a try. And
Yeah.
we will have that in the library at Dice Tower
Okay.
West for the upcoming convention.
Cool. Alte, is that Dawn of Civilization? Is that with Paulo Mori and Ole Steinus for the designers?
Yeah, Paulo Mori, he's the same War of the Ring
Yeah.
guy, right? Yeah.
Yep. Ares Games. Yep, that's exactly it. All right. Yeah, I don't remember the name of that game. When I looked it up while you were talking about it, I recognized the box cover, but I did not know that Paolo Mori and Ole Steinus were the designers. So those two people together those piqued my interest. Ole Steinus also did Champions of Midgard. It's one of my favorite games.
Okay.
So that's cool. That's cool. Paolo Mori. He's hit or miss for me, but the team with him and Ole doing it together, that's interesting. So
Yeah, and
and
it's
to
also
hear that it's a lighter game,
yeah,
okay,
and also like you mentioned, it's unusual, I think, for the company Ares, right? It doesn't like when you talk about Ares games, you wouldn't
mhm,
think of this type of game.
sure,
And that also goes back to sort of a conversation we had several weeks ago about like the Omni gamer, right? I think nowadays, right, it's almost imperative for publishing companies to sort of be omni publishing companies, right? It's very
sure,
hard to sort of stay in your lane, for lack of a better term, as a
yeah,
publishing company because
yeah,
you need to get those multiple revenue streams from the
right,
customers, so you
right,
need to sort of branch out and do different things. So it's nice to
yeah.
see that coming from Aries.
It's interesting that you mentioned Ares games because we've recently on the channel we've done on the flip side we've done a live playthrough for Viking Route, which is another like cooperative game that's coming out from Ares Games, but it's being kickstarted and funded, I believe. And then I just played Builders of Sylvandale from Ares Games, which is also another really like light family weight game from Ares, and my wife and I both really enjoyed it as well. So it's mentioned. It's funny that you mentioned Ares and the fact that they're coming out with these lighter games at this point because you're right. And so anyway, the game that I want to talk about is a game that I just played a couple of times yesterday solo, and it's one that I backed on. I think it was GameFound. It's called Fate: Defenders of Grimheim. And this is from Fricks Games. Jonathan Frixelius is the designer,
Oh,
and
Terraforming Mars.
um,
Yeah.
from Terraforming. Well, I believe it was Jacob Frixelius that did um, Terraforming Mars. I think
Okay.
because I went back and double checked because I definitely remembered Fricks Games from Terraforming Mars. So I was like, well, it was the same designer, and it wasn't. I think it was like a brother or something to that effect.
Okay.
I don't know all of their relations within the Frixelius family, but it's definitely from the same camp. I'll put it that way. And it is a tower defense game where you are defending Grimheim, the town of Grimheim that holds the magical well of Freya, and it has healing properties and all of this other kind of stuff. And so the Freya is off at a wedding that none of us got invited to because we aren't the real warriors of Midgard, and so we are just left to defend Grimheim from onslaughts of hordes coming from. They have like the undead faction, which are Draugr and skeletons and that type of stuff. And then you have the Trollkin, which are trolls and brutes and goblins. And then you have the fire hordes, which are the fire sprites and um, the fire giants and all of that other kind of stuff. And then they also have the legendary bad guys like Grendel and that kind of stuff that are also going to be coming in on some of those reinforcement cards. But anyway, you basically only have 2 actions and for every turn, and you can move, you can attack, you can go and train and make yourself. It's got a really neat little experience, kind of leveling up mechanism in it. You can go get some mana because some of your ability cards are going to be using mana and generating mana and so forth. And it was a neat little system where that kind of self um, kind of self upgrades itself depending on for difficulty, depending on how many players are in the game. Because for how many players are in the game is how many reinforcement cards you draw when it's time to draw reinforcement cards for the bad guys. So if it's only 1 player, then you're only drawing 1 card. But if you're playing with 2 players, you're drawing 2 cards, and so it kind of ramps up with more players that you use. And there's also 2 time tracks which govern how long the game is going to be, but it also governs how many reinforcement phases there are, and one's easy and the other one's a little bit more difficult. So there's a lot of things that I really enjoyed about the game. I've only played it twice, and they were both solo, so I want to play it with more people and see how it goes. But so far, I'm actually really enjoying it, and this is one that I actually personally bought. I didn't get this as a review copy or anything like that. So that's another cool thing, because sometimes when you buy stuff, you go one of 2 different routes, and maybe sometimes it's a little bit of both. But if you buy something, you want it to be good, and because you don't want to have bought something that's a dud. And usually you're either a little bit more forgiving on stuff that you've bought, or you realize off the bat that I shouldn't have bought this.
Right. Yeah.
and so it's like one of those 2, but this one is truly kind of not on either of those, because I am really enjoying it, and there's no remorse at all. So I like it. I'm liking that, first of all, but on top of that, I'm also enjoying the game. And it's got good components in it. I did go all in, so I bought the miniatures upgrade and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really enjoying it. Fate, Defenders of Grimheim, and I'm hoping to get it to the table a little bit more here in the next few weeks, and then we'll get a review of it up on the channel.
We did bring up the topic of about board game companies or publishing companies sort of staying in their lane and sort of having to reach out to the masses, as we've talked about. And it used to, like, for example, like you brought up Simon, right? But I do remember it was a sort of big deal when they came out with Ethnos, right? Because it was sort of portrayed or advertised as their first foray into quote unquote Euro gaming, right? Or their first Euro game, because now people know them as Simon, but it is Cool Mini or Not. That was their whole. They had a, like, talk about staying in your lane, right? They had a specific model. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Kickstarter only, right? Like funded games, and it was the big box mini games. That was their lane. That's what they were staying in. And again, I don't know how old they are, but even if they're only 10, 15 years old, whatever it was, 20, that was sort of the model, like, as a publishing company that many years ago. Hey, this is our lane. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're known for. I mean, look at the name of our company, Cool Mini or Not, period. And then they do Ethnos, and they came out. So they did realize, hey, we're going to branch out and sort of attract more gamers into the fold.
Right. So I think Simon's done it a little bit differently, though. I think that anything that has, like, if you look up on BGG, if you look up Simon Global United, you will see a bunch of games under their top games. As a matter of fact, they have 893 listings. Now that's including expansions and promo packs and all of that kind of stuff. You have to understand how BGG's database works sometimes, but so that's a little bit of a conflated number as far as how many titles are under the Simon Global name. It's not just Cool Mini or Not. They're formerly known as that. It's not just Simon games. They're also distributing a lot of different games, and so that allows them to put kind of those games underneath their umbrella. So a lot of the games that come out are or rather are on BGG's database as being CMON games. They're not really CMON games. CMON just distributed them. I mean, just on this first page here, we have Brass, Birmingham, Root, Arc Nova, Everdell, Frosthaven, and Cascadia. None of those are
Yeah, they're not
CMON
CMON.
games.
Right, they're not CMON games.
So it's like it seems like to me, what they're trying to do is they're keeping their brand, or to use the word that you use, lane, their lane. And so everything that has that CMON stamp on it is usually that miniature board game flair. All of the other ones that are on this list on BGG are, I think, where they're branching out into all of those different lanes. But they themselves, I think, are staying in their specific lane. And there are outliers. I remember where I was at one of their expos, and they had a whole bunch of tables set up to demo a bunch of little like small games that they were going to mass release that year. And I was like, this is really strange because this isn't CMON,
Right.
this isn't Cool Mini or not. But they tried it, and I don't know that it was, I mean, maybe it was, but because I don't know the numbers or anything like that behind it, but it doesn't seem like it was that big of a success, because I think they've switched over to just being a distributor for a bunch of publishers that are out of country, and I think that's probably working better for them than just releasing a whole bunch of titles under their own name.
Yeah, but again, that's I mean, being a distributor and being the actual publisher are like kind of two different things, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
yeah, they just distribute games. But talking about just the average, the absolute, like for example with Capstone, right?
Mhm.
Capstone, when they started acquiring like Gaia Project and some other games, and geez, I'm just blanking right now on Capstone games, but they did, in my opinion, have sort of had a lane. Like also the company that went out of business, which I got a game right here, Deluvia Project, that my laptop is sitting on, TMG, right?
Yeah.
TMG had a lane. Like it seemed
Yep.
like their games were very similar Euro, like a very sort of style. But like Capstone, I was talking about, when they came out with like Wandering Towers, even all of a sudden it's kind of like, what? Like that's
Yeah.
not
No.
that's
Yeah.
not
Absolutely.
Capstone. Like it
Yeah.
just seemed weird, you know.
No, you got that.
Um,
Yeah. No. Totally. I totally understand. I thought the same thing. I was like, Wandering Towers is Capstone.
yeah, yeah,
Capstone is like heavy gamers paradise,
correct.
and Wandering Towers is exactly not that.
Yes, and then there's other companies like you look at say like Osprey Games, right? Which is they're not like a big publisher. They got great games, but they sort of have, I don't know. It just seems weird. I just think that you sort of have to, I think, to be a successful publisher these days, to at least have one or two titles and branch out. Because like you mentioned Fantasy Flight,
Yeah.
right? Now, correct me if
Yep.
I'm wrong here again. I mean, wasn't that a lot of these companies are also started by an individual designer, right? Christian Peterson with Twilight Imperium. I don't know if that was his first game, but that might have been, right? And so
Right.
when you look at a company, sometimes they are founded by the designer themselves, and that's sort of their one or first two games, and sort of
Yep.
that sort of stamps their identity on what the company is initially. But then they
Yep.
realize, hey, in order to grow, then they start going to see prototypes and all that kind of stuff. They start getting ideas, submissions, and all that kind of things. They realize,
Mhm.
wow, we need to produce a little bit more different type of subjects.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I said Fantasy Flight, but I'm looking at their list now, and they are actually all over the place.
yeah,
I mean, just on the first page, you've got a food game a la carte. You've got Ad Astra, the Adventurers, the Pyramid of Horus, which is like a super family game. The Temple of Shock, Age of Conan, the strategy board game, which was not a family game. Then you have Age of War, which is just a little, dice rolling game. Android, Android Infiltration, the Android Netrunner card game. So they're like, they don't their lane is like all 8 lanes.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something like
And again, I just think that's sort of imperative nowadays because again,
yeah.
we see it a lot like at Dice Tower West, right? With our exhibitors, we get a lot of people come in to get a booth or do a demo zone, companies who
Mhm.
maybe have one or two games. And that's again how a lot of these board game companies start with the designer or
Yep.
whatever, or with somebody just
Yeah.
starting with one game and they've got their one or two titles, but then they have to branch out and reach out. And I would even say the same is sort of for designers, right? It's like when you look at people like wow, why does that keep popping up? I don't know if it's oh
You're
wait
it's your camera on your do you have a
oh
Mac? Yeah, there
that's
you
why.
go.
Oh, that's why. Okay. Oh, how do I
Yeah,
know how to
it
do this?
started doing that it started doing that a while back, one of the upgrades to one of the new, OS systems, and, it does a lot of different things. I don't know how much it'll do, like, sometimes if I go like this, it'll have, like, fireworks going off in the background. It happens on my live streams all the time.
Oh, okay. But even like designers, right? So, for example, like one of my favorite designers when I first got into board gaming was, of course, Uwe Rosenberg, right? Because Agricola was like my first sort of real gamer game that blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden he did Patchwork, right? And it was kind of like, what? Like, what?
Huh?
Come on, Uwe, what are you doing to me? You know what I mean? Just, but again, it's a great game, but it just seemed, he, and again, that's just the creative process, right? I'm sure these people all of them, Stefan Feld, Martin Wallace, Uwe Rosenberg, you can name whatever, these big epic designers, Alan Moon, just they're so creative and have so many different ideas that they just
Yeah.
I would say probably not Vital Lacerda, right? I would I would be real
He
kind of surprised.
he stays in his lane.
Yes, he does. He does not freaking cross the lines of his lane at all. He is
He's a
there.
Yeah, it's true. He came up to me one time at it was when I was still with the Dice Tower, and he was like, "I think you're going to like my new game. You should try my new game." And I'm like, "I don't think I'm gonna like your new game, dude."
Yeah, sorry, I don't have about 3 or 4 hours, and my
You
mind's
know,
not behind.
it's like, "You come by and try it." I'm like, "Dude, I don't have time. I know how
Yeah,
long your games are."
yeah, but that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to be diverse, right? With the products you're putting out because that just gives different types of gamers, different types of people a chance
Yeah,
to experience maybe the other games in your line, and now you may create more customers and more fans to your product as a publishing
right.
company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great to have that that business uh, diversity in your company. So because while you do have like you mentioned Osprey used to just be like military games, and they used to do a bunch of I think if their Osprey originally started as just doing like military history manuals and stuff like that about tech manuals for different like submarines and airplanes and all of this kind of stuff. They used to do that, and they started branching into games with a lot of military themed games, and then they started coming out with stuff that is just not military at all. And I have a more than a couple of names that games that are from them that have nothing to do about military, but that's how they got started. So branching out into different diversified fields of the industry is a really cool thing that I wish. Well, I don't want to say I wish because a lot of people are already doing it, and I just hope that it continues because it ultimately when some of these larger publishers start publishing some of these other games because they're just family oriented, well, that's going to pull inevitably more people into the hobby because you'll have people that are able to sit down and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is fun." Well, let me go a little bit further. Well, what else is there in this hobby? And that kind of thing. If you always just uh, publish the games that are for the the people that are already in the hobby, yeah, there's a cash cow that's there to be had, but the same could also be said on the other side of the aisle, where if you publish games that are maybe not for people in the hobby and it catches on, I guess it's just a little bit riskier. that route, because you never really know what exactly is going to catch. But if it's good enough to get picked up by a Target or a Walmart or something to that effect, then you've kind of already made your money, and now the onus is on that company to sell the product.
Yeah, well, here's
Um,
a perfect example of what you're talking about, in my opinion, is Czech games, right? And
yeah,
I believe, I mean, I could
code
be
name.
wrong, that Vlada Chavatil is maybe a part owner, I think, or something in the in a company. I'm not quite sure, but anyway,
I'm not sure.
so they had a certain lane or a certain kind of a style when you thought of Czech games. Then all of a sudden, I remember at Gen Con, it was Code Names. It was the hottest game, and you're like,
Yep,
what? Vlada Chavatil
yep,
with
yep.
Code Names? But again, just like you said, now all of a sudden that game's in Target, Walmart, it's all over. That has become in now terms. I'm not equating it to Monopoly and Life and all that kind of stuff, of course,
Sure.
but it is. Code Names is a mass market game now, right? It's sort
Yeah,
of
yeah. It's a
left the
modern
hobby
classic.
gaming, yeah, and become a mass market game.
Right.
So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yep. Absolutely. I think if more companies are able to figure out how to get there, the better. The problem is figuring out how to get there, because the clients are always so fickle. We consumers are so fickle. What might be very popular today won't be tomorrow. Um, so it's just one of those things where you've got to find that niche, and once you find it, you got to hammer it hard. Um,
But
and sometimes that's not always the best thing, because then you come out with a bunch of stuff that's just revamped this or revamped that, and
right,
that's that's not really innovation. That's just punching a check. You know what I'm saying?
correct.
So
But then you look at a company, and I'm again, I might be wrong. You could probably look this up. Days of Wonder, right? It seemed to
mhm,
me like initially Days of Wonder sort of did have a lane, and they were the ones. They were the kind of company, if I remember correctly, that only puts out like a game every year and a half or something. And they were sort of like really nice, Ticket to
yep,
Ride,
yep,
um, whatever. But they had a really sort of similar style, and
mhm,
they put out games very very rarely. Um,
yep,
but then I
one or two a
remember,
year.
yeah, and then I remember, The River, I believe was one of their games came out. I thought it was an okay game. I thought it was good. Of course, it had the great production of a Days of Wonder game, and
Mhm.
it just sort of fell flat for them, which was kind of surprising because they were sort of a kind of guaranteed winner company when they come out with a game, if you know what I mean,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Any game that
Well,
Days
I
of
mean,
Wonder put out was a sort of winning good game.
yep. No, I totally agree with you. Usually artwork, component quality,
Yep, yep.
box insert, they were all things that were worthy of being kept in the box. I remember Tom used to just uh, he used to just uh, ad hoc throw storage solutions that were in the box out. Just like,
Yeah,
you take all the
yeah,
stuff out now, throw that out. It's not going to go in there anymore. It's a waste of space, and it's just like when it came to Days of Wonder, I was like, wait a minute,
right,
at
right.
least test it out first, because they usually put a little bit more thought into their storage inserts in their boxes, whereas Fantasy Flight had the stupid coffin boxes with the Death Star trench,
Mhm.
and it was all just about making sure that the components got to the consumer in one piece, and then now you have to figure out how to store it in your box. That was kind of the two ends of the spectrum as far as that was concerned. But yeah, Days of Wonder was, and I think still is, one of those companies that if they come out with a game, I'm going to at least be somewhat interested. There are a lot of games that come out that I'm like, don't care, don't care.
Right.
But if Days of Wonder's name is on it, I'm like, okay, what you got? I'll be interested in checking it out. But it's just because of the name, Days of Wonder, and
Correct.
and
Absolutely.
kind of the feeling of quality that comes with that name.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it is so true, and believe me, the next game they got coming out, I can't really say, but it's gonna be, fantastic. So they
I
got another,
imagine.
yeah,
I
they got another,
imagine they have, to a degree, they have what I consider to be at least the Midas touch. I think if they bring anything to the table, I'm usually interested in it, at least initially. And then after I play it, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is probably not for me. Or, wow, I really enjoy this. But they are one of the few companies, I would say one of maybe 5 to 7 companies that if they come out with something, I'm interested.
Yeah, and that sort of brings it back full circle right to the topic we're talking about, because I don't know what their first game was or their first 1 or 2 game was, but it seems that they have been able to maintain success staying in their lane, right? Like
Right.
when you say Days of Wonder, it immediately sort of conjures up an image or a style or a type, the
Yep.
quality, the inserts, everything you're
Yep.
saying of their
Yep.
games. They haven't sort of strayed out or branched out. They've been sort of
Right.
true to their identity. So,
Yep.
and like you said, I think there are very few companies who you can say that for, where it, they've stayed sort of true to their sort of initial success. But again, I think a lot of that might be because of, I wish I knew the history of Days of Wonder, but if you hit an evergreen right off the bat, that gives you a little bit more latitude to sort of stay in your lane,
Yep.
right? And stay
It
with
does.
the type of games that you do.
Or
Um,
if you find a, I'm going to use the word gimmick, and I know gimmick has a very negative connotation to it, and I don't mean to attribute that negative connotation to this, but if you find a gimmick like Chip Theory Games did, where they use poker chips for a lot of
there you go. Yep.
their stuff, that allows you to stay in your lane as well. Because Chip Theory Games, I think, is another group where they found their niche and they did really well at it, and they were able to utilize that niche of using poker chips in a number of different ways, and it's really struck a lot of positive chords with people. And so Chip Theory is another company that I think has stayed. They made their own lane and they stayed in it, and people went along with them for the ride.
True, true. But again, I think that's a good company to bring up, because I think Adam is the designer, right? They both might be Adam and Josh, or whatever, Carlson.
Adam and Josh,
Um,
yeah.
I
Generally
think
speaking, they have other designers in there, yeah, but
right.
yeah.
But yes, so they did stay with chip theory. But so here's where I think the branching off comes with the topic we're speaking about, right? Again, because again, we brought it up with several companies when they start with the designer, right? And they have a couple of games.
Mhm.
So when the company started with the designer, that was their game, that was their style. Maybe they had 1, 2, or 3 more they could keep in the pipeline. But
Yep.
now, when the game has hit huge success like Chip Theory did, and then what was it? Too many, no, I mean, Too Many Bones. And then what was their second one? I can't remember. I think it was the same kind of game, right? What, I
Cloud
don't know.
Spire was another one. Cloud Spider was another chip theory game. Too Many Bones.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, there was one right up. But yeah, so but then all of a sudden they got, like, they went to Hoplocamus, they went to now they got their big one is the Elder Scrolls. So they do
actually,
have, like,
actually, Hoplomachus was their first game. Too Many Bones came after Hoplomachus.
oh, did
They
it
just
really?
yeah, they returned to Hoplomachus to take some of the things. I think I'm not absolutely sure on this, but they took some of the stuff that they kind of they started with Hoplomachus, and it was a small board game. I remember one of the first times we went to Gen Con as the Dice Tower. We were when we had a booth at Gen Con, we were right next to Josh, and it was just him and Adam in their booth, and they had a little 10 by 10 booth, and we had, I think, a 20 by 10 booth,
Uh,
um, and the it was we were so afraid that the Carlsons were going to hate us because our line kept
right.
like blocking off their booth, and Josh was being so gracious. But he kept on saying, "Guys, we got to do something about that line. You're blocking our booth." And so we kept working, and it was just one of those things where, I think we grew into a good relationship with them, but it's definitely started a little rocky because at that point we didn't really know each other that
Right, right,
well.
right, right.
But he's a great guy. Him and his brother both are great people, and it was great to see them take off the way
Yeah,
they did. But yeah, it
absolutely.
started with that year that we were there, they were showing off Hoplomachus to begin with, and then it grew enough to where they were able to put a little bit more time into Too Many Bones, and then Too Many Bones started taking off. And then a few years later, just a couple of years ago, I stopped by Chip Theory's booth, and it's like they started with this little 10 by 10, and now they had like a 25 by 25 or something like that with this huge display. And I said, "Gosh, man, look at how far you've come." And he's like, "I know, right?" And it was just one of those really cool connections to be able to see somebody when they're first starting to see where they've come now. Just
That's
really
right, yes.
cool. But they stayed in their lane. They used that little, and again, I'm using the word gimmick, that little gimmick of those poker chips, and they've improved upon them, and they just really hit well. But I'm in the middle of go ahead, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. No, that's a great story, and it is very true that they have sort of stayed true. So there still are, several companies, and again, sometimes we're a little hyperbolic when we say kind of things.
20 Strong is probably what you're talking about.
What's that?
20 Strong was their new solo game that they just came out with. Hoplomachus Victorum is their new one. JT's been playing that one for a lot. But Cloudspire, Too Many Bones. And again, there's they have 111 titles. Burn Cycle is one that is also from Chip Theory Games. That's kind of a new hotness. But they stick with that idea of using poker chips, that whole chip theory, and they've stuck with it, and they've kind of adapted that thing that's theirs into a number of different kinds of games. And I think that's something where they've kind of they haven't switched lanes, they've kind of adapted their lane to accommodate a number of different kinds of games. And I think that's cool too.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. I mean, and again, we say it a lot, but we are just in a midst of what is it, a bag of riches? I can't think of the term I'm thinking of, but with gaming, you know what I mean? What's the term? Yeah. Multitude of riches? I don't know the saying, whatever.
Sure, a cornucopia. I mean,
whatever.
That's the idea. I mean, it's just a year of plenty. You know what I'm saying? Where
years, not just a year,
yes,
Sam.
Right.
Years.
An era. We have an era of plenty.
And the era
because, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's literally, I always think of that scene from that Weird Al Yankovic movie, UHF, where the kid gets to drink from the fire hose and he is so excited. Yay! They open up the fire hose and it knocks him off the pedestal. He loves it. It's just, that's what it feels like being in the board game industry right now. There's so much. And it's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing as well, because you have a lot of things that are probably being published that need more development. They need more design work. They need more of this. They need more of that. There's a lot of that stuff. Kickstarter, crowdfunding has really made it possible for a lot of people to make a game through crowdfunding that maybe that game wouldn't be made if it went through the normal avenues.
That is true. That is true.
But production. So there's good and bad to it.
Right. That's a topic for a whole nother day. But yeah, that's absolutely true.
You're right.
But yeah,
you're right.
So it's fantastic. I mean, it's good that what's going on in the industry these days. And folks, again, in the comments, please tell us what you think about the board game companies staying in their lane or diversifying. What are your thoughts? What are some companies you believe to have maybe held true to their thing or strayed? And also, what about we don't have time to get into, or what about companies who maybe took the left turn and that ended up being the downfall of the company, right? Because they maybe had a good thing and they went off their lane and they shouldn't have, right? So there's a whole lot
of bad decisions. Yep.
Correct. So there's a whole lot in this discussion about publishing companies staying in their lane, how they stay in their lane, how they diversified. But it's a really interesting topic. Thank you again for taking time to spend with us and watch the video. Please leave the comments below, like the Dice Tower, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yes, and we will see you again next week, right, Sam?
Absolutely.
All right.
And
and
we'll see you on the flip side.
Yes, we will. So from Las Vegas, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm Timm Metivier.
And I am Sam Healey from the Pacific Northwest. Thanks for being here, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.